places like Google Content Network, those start measuring how many people are viewing what you're doing, and then they'll start. It's kind of a affiliation program where they'll allow you to have. They'll contact you because of the amount of viewership you've received, and then they'll start wanting to place ads on your content, and you receive something like 15 cents per click for that. So it's not a direct monetization of your product as much as it is like they're leveraging your reach to get other product announcements out there. But the great thing about the internet is everything that happens on it is completely measurable. You know who's clicked, when they've clicked, how long they stayed there. And a lot of the tools to measure that are free. Google Analytics is a great tool. There's different tiers of measurement that you can do with that. And there's corporate levels that are pay-based, but I hope I'm not lying to you guys. I believe there's a free model for Google Analytics that you can absolutely leverage. It's great. I mean, the amount of information that's on it. I mean, 8 years ago, people were paying $100,000 a month to know this about what was going on the internet, and now it's like, here you go. Here's your free tool. It's really a great tool.
So where do you get, let's say, comparative data so you know how your project is stacking up to other projects?
It depends on what you're measuring.
Yeah.
It absolutely depends on what you're measuring.
I think one of the things that you can do, like if let's say you're a small brand and you're trying to do this with 2 people or 1 person, whatever, have 2 graphs actually. One that's showing how much money you're actually making off of it. The other one showing the kind of engagement that you're getting online about your product. Are those lines following each other? As one grows, is the other one growing? And you're going to know, okay, that buzz is online is helping this growth. If they're going the opposite way, that's telling you something different, and maybe, I don't know, you have to look at what the graphs are saying, but it's one way to start.
I don't look at graphs. I look
prefer
at
not to.
I look at it. Filmmaking is a business. It's not. Yes, it's an art form, but if you don't look at it as a business, you're a fool. If you don't return your investors' finances, you're not going to make anything else. So you've got to look at it as, how do I return the investment? Well, let's start with the budget. If I look at the budget and say it cost me $1,000 per finished minute of webisode content, and I'm making 10 webisodes at 10 minutes each, well, you do the math. You know what you have to return before the investment gets returned. So that's the way I do it. It used to be back in the Inspector Mom days, $1,000 a finished minute. Then it went up to 3,000 finished minute. Now it's back down to 1,000 finished minute LA terms. But it's you look at it mathematically on a budget as a producer, and you measure exactly what your reach has to be, what your return has to be to return the investment, and you do whatever it takes to get that investment returned, or else you're not going to continue to make product.
Can you rephrase the question?
Can you use it in a sentence?
Can you use it in a sentence? Hey,
Yes.
she beat me.
Spell it.
What do you want to know that they didn't talk about that?
What do you want to tell me?
I don't know. Tell it.
Where do you go to look for? Do you have any way of measuring? Do you do any kind of measuring? Where do you go to look for data to compare? Let's say if you were going to pitch investors for a feature film project, you would go and get comparative data on sales of other viewing ticket sales for other film projects. Do you do anything like this when you're dealing with webisodes or doing things online? Is there any place to go for comparative data out there?
Well, that's the deal for a lot of the stuff that I'm looking at. There's not a lot of comparative data because nobody's been doing it very much or for very long. There's not a lot of historical data on that. So you just always still have to prove and get them to trust you that the value equation is adding up for them of what you're saying, how much money you're saying you need, and what it is that you're going to be bringing to the table after they spend the money.
Well, and Google Analytics even will measure you against a similar size, but not the same vertical. So they're going to take, they'll take an industry with this, they'll take a campaign with the same size content, but that it's comparing against that and not necessarily romantic comedies or, so it's not really apples to apples. So the data that is out there is either incredibly expensive to get. So you're going to go back into MRI data, which is like this huge dissection of the American population that you have to buy licenses for. It's incredibly expensive. but you can't necessarily get the detailed data that we're talking about.
I think another thing to consider too, which, you bring up a good point, which is not everyone needs the analytics, a company like ours, those suits in the boardroom, they want to know, why is it that we're allowing Vicky to spend so much time on Facebook and Twitter and going to these conferences and talking to these other techie people? We're paying a lot of money for this, and, what are we getting out of it? So, for us, someone wants to know, maybe, you might have an investor that would want to know, okay, I'm paying you partially for this social media, promotion. What are we really getting from this? But it all depends, on your situation.
The good thing, the silver lining in the clouds of doubt, is that maybe for the first time for a filmmaker, unless you own the content and you just sold it and you can sell it as many times as you want, you really do have the ability to base something on the value that it brings, not necessarily how much it costs to make. Because the value, there's two different things, right? So, it may cost me $50,000 to make this thing, but if the value to the advertiser to be in front of the people that I'm saying that I'm going to draw, that are going to be smacked with their brand because it's what the show's about and people love that, then I'm not charging $50,000 because it's they're going to pay based on the value that to them. It depends on their business. If they're selling $1 million yachts, then it's worth a lot of money to them. So that's a good thing because that makes us happier.
So we can kind of make it up as we go along. That's kind of the bottom line.
Well, the value equation is always there's never two scenarios the same.
Right.
Then let's talk about a little bit about just talking about how do you translate those eyeballs into dollars? Is there a way? Is that what again we've talked? Maybe that campaign isn't intended to do that. It's just intended for visibility or to build your brand. But is there a way to translate eyeballs into dollars? And how do you increase your conversion rate? The buzz isn't any good if they're not buying movie tickets. So, is there any way to?
It depends.
It always depends.
There are tools that can allow you to create, and forgive me for not knowing the details because this is often to a filmmaking niche that I don't know, but I know that there are tools that allow you to create like tickets or scanning items that they can at the box office then scan, so like a coupon-based system so that you can actually quantify how many people are downloading that and then having it scanned there. I don't know the actual tool that does that, but otherwise it's the same. It's the same dilemma that every marketer has: is what is the value of my brand awareness, and how is that actually? What is my return on investment? Just making people aware. Coca-Cola doesn't need to have $8 million campaigns to make people drink their product, but as soon as they become irrelevant, then so a lot of what they do is just keeping their name relevant. So it's very difficult to quantify specifically, and several different companies have multipliers over time based on historical data that can say we reach 1 million people on this particular channel. Historically, we've seen that converts approximately 3% of them, but it's all based on historical data. It's very hard to quantify when you're in the very beginnings.
I've had the contracts in the past that basically state that their products would have to be seen X number of times per episode. And I haven't done it in a sense that we get paid 25 cents an eyeball or anything like that, but I've basically been able to prove the fact, because of the reach, that the target audience will see their product 4 times per week, and this is what it's going to be worth in the bottom line. So typically for me, it's done in the beginning of the contract phase, to where, it's say like $200,000 up front, we're guaranteeing X amount of reach and unique visitors to their sites.
I think the promotional code, which is what you were talking about, Bonnie, is one of the main ways that companies, use to try to get that, direct, this click gave me this sale. But it's not always easy.
And there's also like a plus or minus % accuracy on that,
Right.
because sometimes promotion codes are are handed over from friend to friend, and it's not necessarily an evaluation of your marketing channel as much as it is. There are whole websites devoted to coupon codes and giving those things away. So, but nevertheless, it is a level of measurement. The problem is, like, when you're talking about like a theater, they have to be willing to accept that code somehow, and getting that relationship sometimes is really difficult.
Let's talk for a second about crowdsourcing and how can you use it? Do you use it as a focus group to gain insight, or about your customers, like let's say like YouTube or Facebook? American Idol fans give feedback and voting, Dancing with the Stars, all of those kinds of things. But now you're also seeing a lot more of shows like BBC has Virtual Revolution, which is documenting where people could download clips and re-edit them, help name the series. It's much more interactive. You've got sites now like Tosh or YouTube with the presidential debates. I mean, how do you use crowdsourcing? How do you use it? Are there some other ways you can just talk about using it to your advantage?
Yeah, I think the main, most interesting way, I think, for people to use it is to involve their audience, involve them in the creation of a story or in the development of a character or a product of any kind, actually.
I'm sorry to interrupt. There may be people that don't know what crowdsourcing is.
Okay, so let's say I am writing a novel, and I've got this following on Twitter, right? And so I get feedback from my Twitter followers on, I'm thinking of making this character, an alcoholic who hasn't had a drink in 10 years. And maybe I get feedback that, no, it needs to be more recent and whatever. So then, I get that crowd really involved, and giving me feedback on what they want to hear anyway. And because that's what they're going to promote for me, right? My influencers want to promote things that they are excited about. So they help me with that development. Another, actually, a real scenario is, I think it was The Guardian, had gotten from the government in England like 1 million pages of all this documentations of things that went on, in the government. And of course, they couldn't go through all that. So they just made it accessible online and had people do it. They said, pick your 5 pages or 10 pages, and you analyze it for us and tell us what you thought of those 10 pages you took. And people loved it. They got huge amount of people volunteering to analyze all this data for them for free.
How actively do you involve the audiences in some of the brands or some of the campaigns you've worked with? Can you talk about a couple of successful campaigns maybe?
Not off the top of my head, I can't think of anything that we've done recently where we, no, I take that back. Mountain Dew is one of our clients, and we have something called Dew Labs, and we leverage that passenger company that we spoke about before. And one of the things that, I don't know if you're familiar with the campaign Democracy, but Mountain Dew comes out with a new flavor every couple of years. And they crowdsource their fans to determine which of those flavors it's going to be. And it goes all the way back from to the creation of the flavor, which they develop in Dew Labs. So they incentivize their fans, which the followers that Passenger helped them create, to come up with sort of the formula for this flavor, like 3% lime and 4% pineapple. And they create this sort of flavor, and then there are finalists within that, and then they take it larger. And Democracy is actually quite cool. I don't know. I didn't work specifically on this project, so I don't know what